Good morning. Welcome to Chalice Unitarian Universalist Congregation. We are a community of diverse beliefs and experiences, nurturing the liberal religious spirit and united by our desire to grow in love and in service. Whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever your life's journey, you are welcome here. Whether you gather with us every Sunday, once or twice a year, or are here with us this morning for the first time, we are glad you are here. I'm Reverend Sharon Wiley, Chalice's minister. Our worship musician this morning is our music director, Tim McKnight, and our song leaders are Patty Carlisle and Tom Karlstrom. Welcome to this online worship service. So let me orient newcomers a little bit. But let me jump in and tell you about something we're changing today to give a different try. We aren't doing greetings to each other during the service, so you are encouraged to greet each other beforehand, which you were doing, and so that's something you can continue to do, especially for those of you for whom these orientation words are very familiar. So, whether you have a microphone on your computer, whether you have a camera on your computer, it doesn't matter. You cannot unmute yourself during this service and you are not visible to the rest of us. So you don't need to worry that any of us can hear you or see what you're doing. We hope you're relaxed and comfortable wherever you're watching the service. If you get a notice that pops up during the service that says internet unstable, that means that your internet is unstable. So if that happens, you might want to see if you have other devices on at home that you might want to move to airplane mode to help free up the connection for you and help stabilize that. If my internet becomes unstable or if Zoom crashes, that's never happened to us so far, but that could happen. Those are the things that could disrupt the worship. And that's just how it is. So if something like that were to happen, just sit tight. If you were kicked out of the service, come back in and we'll see if we can get back on track. So this is me standing at the door, standing on the courtyard Sunday morning, greeting you as you walk into the chapel. So let's all give ourselves a big hello, a welcome hello. I look forward to hugging you in person again someday. So as you already know, many of you, if you we have a chat function. People are posting there already. And we'll have other times during the service where we'll post things there. So I'm going to post into the chat. There we go. This is a link to our online connection card. If you're new to the congregation and would like to receive our email announcements, you can fill out the online connection card in order to be added to our email list. Also, if you're a regular attendee at Chalice and you have a question that you would normally ask on a connection card, or if you have any kind of change in contact information, your physical address or your email address, you can use that same link to let us know of those changes. I'm also going to provide my email address. There you go. If you would like to submit a prayer request to me, or if you have any kind of confidential information that you'd like me to know, these are things you can email to me and I'll read them privately after the service. Now, some of our congregants love the chat function and use it during the service, which is great. Some congregants don't like the chat box and find it distracting. You don't have to have it open. If you don't like having the chat box open, you can close it. So all you would do to do that is click on the chat button on your menu. Most of us have it at the bottom of our screen. So you click on that button to open the chat, but you can also click on that button to close the chat back up. When you do post to chat, you want to make sure that you use that little blue drop-down menu to make sure you're posting to all panelists and attendees. I'm the only panelist, so if you post to panelists, I'm the only one who sees it, and I probably won't see it during the service. So we want to make sure we share with each other so we can all see what we're talking about. So let's take a breath together. The chalice, as a symbol of Unitarian Universalism, arose as a beacon of hope in an atmosphere of tyranny. The chalice arose as a sign of promise that the marginalized will neither be forgotten nor ignored, because they are beloved and precious in the eyes of the holy. This morning, we remember all of the people who have been told explicitly or implicitly through police violence or government policy, through derision or dehumanization, that they're anything less than whole, anything less than beloved. As we are each invited to light a chalice in our homes, may we make of our lives a beacon, a symbol of our promise to draw the circle wide, a sign that we will not rest until all means all. We invited Kate Gaunt to light the chalice this morning. The words of our call to worship come from the Reverend Rosemary Bray McNatt. By no means are we Unitarian Universalists perfect. We often fail as much as we succeed. Yet even when we have broken our vows 1,000 times, we return to this essential work of justice and liberation for all. We do the work best when we remember what church is and what it is not. Church is not a place to hide. It is not the place to get away from the world. It is not a place where we get to pretend that the lives we live and our particular situations are not terribly complex, often confusing, and sometimes depressing. Church is the place where we stand with one another, look the world in the eye, attempt to see clearly, and gather strength to face what we see with courage, and yes, with joy. Let us worship together. You're invited to join in singing.
When I am frightened, will you reassure me? When I am uncertain, will you hold my hand? Will you be strong for me? Sing to me quietly. Will you share some of your stories with me? If you will show me compassion, then I may learn to care as you do. Then I may learn to care. When I am angry, will you still embrace me? When I am thoughtless, will you understand? Will you believe in me? Stand by me willingly. Will you share some of your questions with me? If you will show me acceptance, then I may learn to give as you do. Then I may learn to give. When I am troubled, will you listen to me? When I am lonely, will you be my friend? Will you be there for me? Comfort me tenderly. Will you share some of your feelings with me? If you will show me commitment, then I may learn to love as you do. Then I may learn to love.
If you have a sorrow you would like to share with the community this morning, now is the time to share it in the chat box. These won't be shared out loud, but please feel free to respond to each other in the chat. And this is the time for sorrows. We'll share joys a bit later. So we'll listen to some piano music, and if you'd like to light a candle of sorrow in your own home, this is the time. May our sorrows be lessened. May our burdens be lightened. In sorrow and challenge, may we know ourselves always held and never alone. May we act to extend our warmth to all who are hurting in our wider world. And now, a story. Our story is Something Else by Catherine Cave and illustrated by Chris Riddell. On a windy hill, alone, with nothing to be friends with, lived something else. He knew that that was what he was because everyone said so. If he tried to sit with them or walk with them or join in their games, they always said, "Sorry, you're not like us. You're something else. You don't belong." Something Else did his best to be like the others. He smiled and said hi like they did. He painted pictures. He played their games when they let him. He brought his lunch in a paper bag like theirs. It was no good. He didn't look like them or talk like them. He didn't see the things they saw. He didn't play the way they played. As for his lunches, "You don't belong here," they said. "You're not like us. You're something else." Something Else went home. While he was getting ready for bed, there was a knock on the door. Something was standing on the doorstep. "Hi there," it said. "Great to meet you. Can I come in?" "Excuse me," said Something Else. "You're welcome," said the creature. It stuck out a paw, or maybe a flipper. Something Else looked at the paw. "I think you've come to the wrong place," he said. The creature shook its head. "No, I haven't. This place is perfect. Look." And before Something Else realized what was happening, it walked right in and sat down on Something Else's supper. "Do I know you?" asked Something Else, puzzled. "Know me?" the creature laughed. "Of course you do. Take a good look. Go on." Something Else looked. He walked round the creature from front to back and back to front. He didn't know what to say, so he didn't say anything. "Don't you see?" the creature cried. "I'm just like you. You're something else, and I'm one too." It stuck out its paw again and smiled. Something Else was too surprised to smile back. He didn't take the paw either. "Like me," he said. "You're not like me. In fact, you're not like anything I've ever seen. I'm sorry, but you're definitely not my sort of something else." He walked to the door and opened it. "Good night." The creature put down its paw slowly. "Oh," it said. It looked sadder and smaller. It reminded Something Else of something, but he couldn't think what. While he was trying to remember, the creature left. Then Something Else remembered. "Wait," he cried, "don't go." He ran after the creature as fast as he could. When he caught up, he grabbed its paw and held on tight. "You're not like me, but I don't mind. You can stay with me if you'd like to." And the creature did. From then on, Something Else had something to be friends with. They smiled and said hi to each other. They painted pictures. They played each other's games, or tried to. They ate their lunches side by side. They were different, but they got along. And when something turned up that really was weird looking, they didn't say he wasn't like them and he didn't belong there. They moved right up and made room for him too. The end. Our reading this morning is a clip from a TEDx talk by professor and author John Cacioppo in 2013.
We are connected across our lifespan to one another through a myriad of invisible forces that, like gravity, are ubiquitous and powerful. After all, social species, by definition, create emergent structures that extend beyond an organism. Structures that range from couples and families to schools and nations and cultures. These structures evolved hand in hand with neural, hormonal, and genetic mechanisms to support them because the consequent social behavior helped these organisms survive, reproduce, and leave a genetic legacy. To grow to an adulthood for a social species, including humans, is not to become autonomous and solitary. It's to become the one on whom others can depend. Whether we know it or not, our brain and biology have been shaped to favor this outcome. The evolutionary biologist David Sloan Wilson notes that if you ask people, what are the traits of a good person? You hear traits such as kind, generous, compassionate, and empathic. If you ask people, what are the traits of an evil person? You hear traits such as cruel, greedy, exploitive, and selfish. Said differently, the traits of a good person depict someone who cares about themselves and others. And an evil person cares about themselves at the expense of others.
When I wake up in America, I see my neighbors there with every type of clothes and shoes, hats and skin and hair, every fine belief and custom. Scores of songs from who knows where. When I wake up in America, our stories fill the air. Wake up, despierta. Wake up, despierta. Wake up in America. The light in the harbor shines for us all. When I wake up, I see the kids playing, happily swaying. Good to be staying in a place like this, with a face like this. When I wake up in America, I put away my fear, and I love my neighbor as myself. And I say, I'm glad that you're here. We have found our Wake up, please, America. The light in the harbor shines for us all. When I wake up, when you wake up, when we wake up in America.
About a year and a half ago, I preached a sermon asking, are humans good or evil? And like a good Unitarian Universalist, I arrived at the answer, yes, humans are good and evil. Any one of us is capable of doing good, but also capable of inflicting harm. Evil has always been a big word to me, and I've wondered and continue to wonder how useful it is to us. Even though I didn't grow up going to a church, it's hard to shake the impression that evil connotes something supernatural, a malevolent force. But I also keep coming back to the word evil, and I hear many of you using it as well, because we see evil at work around us. I've been reading a book written in 1983 by psychiatrist M. Scott Peck. He's best known as the author of the best-selling book, The Road Less Traveled. The book I'm reading is called People of the Lie, The Hope for Healing Human Evil. Peck is explicitly Christian and believes in demonic evil, actually. So he uses the phrase human evil to distinguish from that. And this phrase, human evil, has also helped me to let go of some of my own baggage around the word evil. So we can be clear that we're talking about human evil, no matter what your other beliefs may or may not be. Most of his book is about his theory of human evil at the individual level from his perspective as a psychiatrist. He describes evil people as not being able to tolerate any sense of their own imperfections. He theorizes that this is an extreme and harmful form of narcissism. This refusal to see their own imperfections, this rejection of self-reflection, is in order to avoid maturity and spiritual growth. He observes the following characteristics in the people he deems evil. They lash out at anyone who dares reproach them. They sacrifice others to preserve their self-image of perfection. In any conflict, they perceive the problem to be anyone else's, not theirs. They project their own bad behavior onto others. Peck writes, the words image, appearance, and outwardly are crucial to understanding the morality of evil. While they seem to lack any motivation to be good, they intensely desire to appear good. Their goodness is all on a level of pretense. It is, in effect, a lie. This is why they are called the people of the lie. What Peck doesn't talk about explicitly, but is implicit in what I've just shared, is how desperately the evil require other people to be around them. To be alone is to be almost unbearable, because if it is important to appear good, then there must be people around against whom one's goodness will be reflected back to them. Imagine how good it must feel to an evil person to have, for example, an arena full of people cheering at every reprehensible thing that is said. So I thought you might find that as interesting as I do. But what I really wanted us to reflect on today is what Peck calls group evil. He devotes a chapter to this, and for many of us, this will be even more recognizable than the idea of individual evil people. The arena full of cheering people, in other words. Also, the police officers whose violence has been so much in the news these past weeks, even years. Now, I do want to caution that Peck's observations about group evil were much more hypothetical than his observations of individual human evil. As a psychiatrist, he had worked with many, many individuals, and his theory of human evil arose from that experience of trying to make sense of some of his most extreme cases. So he's informed by his up-close observations of people he had known personally. His observations about groups were not from his own direct experience, except as an observer of society and events, just like any of us. This is what interested him about evil and groups. He wrote that he was thoroughly convinced that much of the evil of our time is related to specialization, and that we desperately need to develop an attitude of suspicious caution toward it. What he means by specialization is the specialization of work, like farmers, mechanics, publishers, even himself as a psychiatrist and an author. He noted that although specialization was necessary to maintain modern society's high standard of living, that it was also dangerous. He wrote, and I'm quoting, "Specialization contributes to the immaturity of groups and their potential for evil through several different mechanisms. For example, the fragmentation of conscience," end quote. He used as a hypothetical example the question of napalm use in the Vietnam War. He imagined asking the manufacturers of napalm about its use and being told, well, that they're just the suppliers, that who he really wants to talk to is the ordnance branch of the military, the policy people. And then he imagines the policy people telling him it's not their job, it's just their job to decide how to conduct the war, but not whether or not there is a war. And they direct him to the executive branch, to the White House, and so on, with no one feeling responsibility for doing anything except what they've been told to do. Again, he writes, "Whenever the roles of individuals within a group become specialized, it becomes both possible and easy for the individual to pass the moral buck to some other part of the group. The plain fact of the matter is that any group will remain inevitably potentially conscienceless and evil until such times as each and every individual holds himself or herself directly responsible for the behavior of the whole group, the organism of which he or she is a part," end quote. He goes on to describe the dynamics that contribute to group evil. So remember that he's writing in 1983, so most of his references are from the Vietnam War. So the first thing he observes or brings up is that individuals under stress tend to regress. As we're all living through a pandemic right now and living in a state of constant stress, most of us might feel a sense of recognition at this observation right away. Individuals under stress tend to regress. Our resiliency is diminished, our sense of feeling calm and grounded. It is natural to regress in response to chronic stress. We have less resources to draw from. He's also already named that evil is a kind of immaturity. As I noted earlier, he observes that evil people are not able to tolerate any sense of their own imperfections, and that this refusal to see their imperfections, this rejection of self-awareness, is to avoid maturity and spiritual growth. So Peck feels that people under stress, who are regressing because of that stress, are therefore sort of primed potentially for evil action. He also notes that people tend to regress in group settings and writes, if you do not believe this, watch a Lions Club meeting or a college reunion. So he notes that in a group setting, most groups quickly sort themselves into a leader or two and a number of followers, absolving the followers of responsibility for group action. So this may sound silly if you're imagining a church group, for example, but he's referencing groups like military squads and police forces, groups where individualism is not valued and group cohesiveness is a high priority. So remember, he's interested in specialization. One of the quickest ways to foster group cohesion is the creation of an enemy, hatred of an outgroup. We have lots of examples of this. He observes that just as evil individuals cannot tolerate criticism, neither can groups. And that a group sense of failure or not doing well can prompt in the group a desire to lash out. So the central example he uses in his book is a military squad that committed war crimes during the Vietnam War. And it's easy to focus on the crimes of that group, but Peck does not let all of us off of the hook. Remember, again, we're talking about specialization. Ultimately, the evils of war are a collective evil perpetrated by all of us, because it's we, the citizens, who allow war to flourish and who allow a subset of our society to inflict harm on other people. We've specialized, we've made that their job, not our job. We aren't the ones fighting the war, but we are the ones allowing war to be fought. Peck also turns his attention to the police, writing, "One does not become a police officer by accident. A young man of lower middle class origins who is both aggressive and conventional, for instance, would be quite likely to seek a position on the force. The result is that a police force is usually a quite homogeneous group of people who have much in common with each other and are distinctly different from other types of groups, such as anti-war demonstrators and college English majors," end quote. So our culture as a whole has created a specialization for police. And then our society has structured itself so that certain kinds of people are appropriate for that kind of work. And we allow that to happen. So finally, he makes this observation: society at large, that's us, employs specific types of people to perform its specialized roles. As, for instance, it employs aggressive conventional men to perform its police functions. The author died in 2005, but I'm guessing he would not be at all surprised by many of the challenges we find ourselves facing in the United States these days. Talking about these group dynamics, I hope lifts up why talking about the individuals in the group isn't actually that meaningful. You get into the group and you become part of the group dynamic. The resources of the individuals almost don't matter. So to reiterate, I know it's a lot of information. Groups have a tendency toward immature functioning including a desire for group cohesion that often flourishes by designating an enemy or an outgroup. When groups have specialized functions, they are potentially absolved from responsibility for their actions, allowing for the possibility of evil action. When they feel a collective sense of failure, that can prompt a desire to lash out, which also allows the possibility of evil action. So we'll let that sink in and come back to it in a few minutes. We shared our sorrows earlier in the service, and now it's time for our joys. If you have a joy you would like to share with the community this morning, now is the time for sharing in the chat box. Again, these won't be shared out loud, but feel free to respond to each other in the chat. This is the time for joys. We'll listen to piano music, and if you would like to light a candle of joy in your own home, this is the time. May our joys be multiplied. May we act to extend our warmth to all who are rejoicing in the wider world. Chalice is a robust community of people with diverse gifts and interests. We have many groups and activities that meet regularly. Here is information about one of them.
Hi, my name is Becky Songa, and I'm the facilitator of the family meditation group that meets on Mondays at 4 o'clock. This is meditation time that has been set aside for any Chalice congregant, but is open to people with families. We know that it can be sometimes hard to sit down and meditate and not have children interrupting or making noise, and it's okay. During this time, we handle that splendidly. So you might be wondering, well, what is family meditation time like? Well, we start out first by getting out the wiggles with a little meditative flow called Qigong. We spend about 5 or 10 minutes doing that, checking in. We're just starting a new meditation series, which I'm calling Journey into the Wisdom Mandala of the 5 Directions. We are exploring the different wisdoms that come from the directions, the seasons, the animals, colors, and all of the things around us in nature. And we'll be using these to help us understand how to transform negative emotions such as depression, overwhelm, anger, desire, greed, overworking, or workaholic tendencies into wisdoms that we can utilize in our everyday life to be part of the collective good that moves forward in a positive way. I hope that you will take some time to join us soon.
Chalice is more than a place. We're a community of people. When you hear about activities such as family meditation, then you know this is part of who we are. We are blessed by Becky offering her gifts to the congregation this way. The Sunday offering is an expression of the generosity that makes our congregational life possible. As Buddhist teacher Christina Feldman writes, generosity lies at the heart of spiritual practice. Extending generosity to ourselves and others gladdens our heart, is a direct way of healing division, and brings joy. Please text your donation to Chalice. If you haven't texted a donation before, know that once you text the amount, just the dollars, you'll get a reply with a link to follow to enter your credit card information. And if you've already entered your credit card information previously when you've donated, you don't need to enter it again after that. If your Sunday donation is part of your pledge payment, please be sure to indicate pledge after the dollar amount. You'll see an example of that on the next screen. And you can make a text donation anytime. It doesn't need to be during worship if this is something you remember later on you want to do. The phone number will be on screen in a moment, and I'll also put it in the chat box. You are invited to give generously. Please join in dedicating our offering with words of affirmation. As Unitarian Universalists, we aspire to teach the fragile art of hospitality, to revere both the critical mind and the generous heart, to prove that diversity need not mean divisiveness, and to witness to all that we must hold the whole world in our hands.
This is the moment, this is the day, when I send all my doubts and demons on their way. Every endeavor I have made ever is coming into play. It's here and now today. This is the moment.
So as you heard earlier, I've been finding M. Scott Peck's work very thought-provoking and meaty to chew on. And then just this week, I was introduced to John Cacioppo's work on loneliness, some of which you heard in the clip we played earlier. In contrast to Peck's heady and intellectual work, Cacioppo seems to me to be suggesting something very similar, but stated so simply. The traits of a good person depict someone who cares about themselves and others. And an evil person cares about themselves at the expense of others. We can apply similar thinking to groups. A good group strengthens and betters its individual members while caring about other people and groups. An evil group corrupts and diminishes its individual members while hurting other people and groups. Peck talked about maturity and immaturity without specifics, but Cacioppo spells it out, again, so simply. To grow to an adulthood for a social species, including humans, is not to become autonomous and solitary. It's to become the one on whom others can depend. American culture is so individualistic. We have a hard time talking about the importance of the community, the importance of the collective. And here, these two concepts identify the role of the collective succinctly. How we relate to other people reflects our maturity and determines whether we are a good or bad person. The danger in reflecting on good and evil people is that it creates a stark dichotomy, as if we're simply one or the other. We all have our good days and our bad days, our kind and generous thoughts and our mean, small thoughts, our times when we're kind towards others, our times when we're selfish. Most of us are complex. But we are living through a time of turmoil, unrest, pandemic, the potential for transformation, the threat of fascism and authoritarianism, and with an important election less than 5 months away. Now is a time to observe and learn, to reflect on the events and actions we see going on all around us, and to take action ourselves when appropriate. We see kindness, commitment, compassion, generosity. We also see cruelty, selfishness, greed, and exploitation. Good and evil, all around us. As we move through the coming weeks and months, may we have the courage to know and name evil and to respond to it when we see it. Please join in singing.
Answering the call of
words come from the Reverend D. Scott Cooper. The world aches for us to join together and bring about healing, toil for justice, and produce ever increasing love. This is our calling. Go forth and act accordingly. Amen. You are invited to close our time together by singing the well. After the service, you're invited to join our coffee hour, and we'll post a link to the coffee hour in the chat box.